a lot of that decision, obviously it's personal, whether or not you need a house, if you want a yard for your kids and for your dog, and how long you're going to be somewhere, and just what your personal goals are that you don't want to have to be faced with moving if you're renting a house. So that whole should you rent where you live or should you own where you live discussion obviously is a personal discussion, but let's talk about it from a strictly financial standpoint. And I think the wrong question is being asked. I think the question is, should you rent where you live versus own where you live? It should be more, should you finance where you live versus rent where you live? So the question is really around the financing. When you look at what the cost of home ownership is these days, let's say it's a $250,000 to $500,000 house range. The mortgage is the biggest consideration from a financial standpoint because, as you know, on a 30-year loan, you're going to pay 3 to 4 times for that house what you bought it for. And we all know houses are not going to double and triple in value over the next 30 years, more than likely. We've hit stagnation in terms of income. Incomes are not growing exponentially in relation to rents and housing costs and housing values. The only reason we've reached the level of housing values that we're at now, which are basically back to where they were in the peak of the market before the crash in 2008 and 9, we've really only just begun to reach back to those levels prior to the 2008 and 9 crash. It's all about interest rates. Interest rates are so low, it overinflates the price of housing, just like the automobile industry. The banks, the financial markets, that's who created the mortgage industry. That's who created the financial products so that you could pay $70,000, $60,000, $50,000 for a vehicle. That's ridiculous, right? Vehicles should be $20,000, $30,000. The only reason they're $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 is because you can finance them for 60 months. You can get zero interest. So it's all about the financing. It's all about that debt instrument that's been created to inflate the price point on these houses and these vehicles. So a 30-year loan for a $250,000 house, you're going to end up spending about $700,000, $750,000 on that house. That's what you're going to pay for it. That house is not going to be worth $750,000. Let's say it doubles. Let's say that $250,000 house doubles in 30 years. So that's $500,000. So you're in the whole $250,000. On top of that, you've spent $10,000 to $12,000 a year maintaining that house, the maintenance, insurance, taxes, all the extra costs of home ownership versus renting. You can rent that level of house for about $1,200, $1,500 a month. Then you could take that $10,000 to $12,000 extra that you would have spent in home ownership and invest that into something that generates a compounded interest return of 5%. Then you've got $800,000 at the end of a 30-year period. You've spent $200,000 to $300,000 in rent over that 30-year period. If you're renting for $1,200 a month, basically you're going to spend about $300,000, $300,000 in rent over a 30-year period. So you've come out with $500,000 net profit on that transaction versus a $250,000 loss by owning a house. And you've got liquid value of $800,000 versus a house only having $500,000. So from a financial standpoint, hands down, renting makes sense all day long versus owning. But again, it's not necessarily the right thing or wrong thing to do. It's all personal. It's all what meets your goals. If you can pay cash, it's a different conversation. And if you can buy the house where you can make money on it, which is generally going to be a short-term finance deal or a cash deal, and let's say you buy that $250,000 house for $150,000 and you live in it and you sell it, then it can be a profit at the end of the day. And really what you're out is that $10,000 to $12,000 a year that you're spending on the taxes, insurance, maintenance, whatever it is it took to improve the house. So I would ask the question and look at it from the standpoint of the financing and the financial decision. And then of course it's a personal decision. So there is no one size fits all for everybody. There is no right or wrong. If you need a house, you need a house. If you want a house, you want a house. It's a personal decision. It's a financial decision that you're going to make. At the end of the day though, financially, you are better off renting than you are owning unless you buy something that's really going to exponentially grow in value. And right now we are not seeing that. We are only seeing housing values get back to where they were at a level prior to the big financial crisis in 2009 when everything tanked and all the housing stock got cut in half in a lot of areas. So those are the things to consider: renting where you live versus owning where you live. Whatever the best decision is for you, put it down on paper, look at the math. If you can pay cash and that's what you want to do, that's great. If you have to finance it, look at the overall cost of that financing in the long term and see if there's another way you can skin that cat through owner financing or rent to own or something like that. So that is my 2 cents on owning or renting where you live. I hope it's helpful. I hope it helps you make the right decision, which is your decision. Ultimately, it's what's right for you and your family, and it's what your needs are, what your goals are, and where you ultimately want to be in your life with your investments in your portfolio.